Dispenza, who will tell you a little bit about her background and her life. She's a former nun in the Catholic Church and also held other positions, was a principal of a school. And she and her spouse, Marianne Woodruff, went to Rome in February for on the occasion of the Pope's conference on sex abuse. And they had a lot to say, and we are very excited that she's here, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her experiences then. So Mary, thank you.
And Marianne, did we talk about Marianne?
Go ahead.
Marianne is here accompanying me because we went together to Rome, and she is doing the audio and the visuals. And in Rome, she was my hairstylist and my costume. She kept me on track. But I wanted to thank you for asking me because I really love this church. Every time that I come, at least 3 or 4 persons say, "We're so happy you're here. Thanks for coming." And I'm delighted, and I'm also like the lapsed Catholic, you know, that comes at Easter and Christmas. But I still am very at home when I come to Newport, and I know one of your goals is hospitality, so you sure show that to me. And I probably know more about your church than some of you. So, when I was preparing for today, a question that came to me is, how did I get from there, my childhood, to here? And I think it's a question we could all ask. How did we get here this morning? And I believe that it's happened by design, not by chance. But something bigger than ourselves brings us right to this point. And because of that, this becomes a sacred space and place because we're here to give and receive from each other. So I'm always honored when I come together with a group of people because it is by design and it's a gift. You are a gift and a blessing this morning. And in my past 26 years, I've had the honor of having a traveling companion, and it's Marianne Woodruff. So by virtue of that, we've been to many places, wonderful places, romantic places, beautiful places. But I have to say, this one was not on my bucket list. It was not on our bucket list to go to the Vatican. But there we were. I had the honor of going on behalf of SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. So that's how I got to Rome, and Marianne came along with us. It was during the summit, the Pope's Summit on teens and clergy abuse. And I went to be a voice for all the hundreds and thousands of other survivors that had no voice, and for those who had claimed their voice but couldn't be there, and I was there to speak truth to power. And as you may know, the Catholic Church is among one of the most powerful institutions in the world and gravely responsible for a misuse of power and cover-ups, even to this day, of the secret systemic problem of sexual crimes against children and vulnerable adults. There are approximately 400,000 priests around the world, which translates into hundreds of thousands of children raped, tortured, and severely harmed by them. And this data comes from SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. I being just one of those hundreds of thousands of children. I being one of the lucky ones. I didn't take my life. I'm here today, and I've lived to tell my story and share my journey as best as I can. And along the way, like many survivors, I lost my church. my community, but I didn't lose my God. And God was there. That's why I've named this From There to Here. God was there in my childhood, and God is here now. And some survivors of sexual violation and other life tragedies, they turn away from God. Many of my friends have turned away from God. They don't do church, and they see God as allowing terrible things to happen. I turned toward God. And at age 7, Sister Brenda had already taught me that God knew my most secret thoughts, words, and deeds. That was an answer to one of our catechism questions that we had to memorize by the 2nd grade. And that nothing but nothing could stop God from loving me. So at a very early age, God became my friend and my companion. And to this day, we talk frequently. Now, I like to tell you this little story in my childhood that brought me from there, and I believe to here and to Rome. One day, at age 7, I went looking for my mom, who drove the school bus and worked in the rectory. I just wanted to say hello to her. She wasn't there. She was in the lunchroom talking to the lunchroom ladies. As I went to find her, I noticed that the auditorium hall was very dark this particular day, but a light was flickering that caught my eye, and a clicking sound, and something up front was flashing on a screen. I followed the light and the sound until I was interrupted by Father, the priest, who beckoned me to sit on his lap. I was so happy and so excited because, first of all, he was Father, like God, and I am sitting on his lap, right next to the magical machine, with the wheels going round and round and round, until the priest's hands were inside of me. Then everything stopped. Everything went black. The lights went out. I went out. The wheels stopped spinning. I disappeared and became invisible. Eventually, the priest walked me to the back of the dark hall and left me there. I went into a small bathroom and I washed and I washed. I left little Mary on the bathroom floor that day and went back many, many years later to pick her up. I never told anyone, not even my mom. I told only God, and that God connection brought me here today. From here to there and there to here, I am sure of it. Now, I wanted you to take a big breath before we move on and go to Rome. Now we're going to Rome, going from here to there. And we chose this clip from many because it sets the stage well for what I'd like to talk to you about.
Day 2 now on the unprecedented summit on sexual abuse. Today, the nearly 200 Catholic Church leaders called to Rome by Pope Francis heard firsthand from a survivor of that abuse. NBC's Jen Gray is covering the meetings for us and joins us now live from a location that overlooks St. Peter's Square. Jen?
Hey there, David. Good evening. Look, discussions are continuing inside the Vatican, but it's what's being said outside these walls that may be getting the most attention and making the biggest impact here. The central focus of Day 2 of the Vatican Abuse Summit, accountability.
We have to be accountable in our ministry.
A word structure of accountability seemingly never that far from the minds or mouths of the clergy gathered here.
We need to be together when it comes to having structures of accountability.
But how do you account for what Mary Dispenza says happened to her?
It's been overwhelming.
Raped by her parish priest at just 7 years old, still somehow gathering her strength, clinging to her faith, becoming a nun. only to be abused again, this time by a superior in her order.
I never dreamt that I would be standing here in this role.
The role of the survivor, unbroken, and demanding change from the church.
It's a make or break time.
Mary has hope, but little confidence in those being here.
There won't be a church unless some significant changes happen quickly.
Instead, she says, the battle of change may fall to those not at the altar, but in the congregation.
Demand the records, go storming into your archdiocese, but do something.
Because she knows firsthand the horror that comes with doing nothing. Just an amazing, courageous woman here, like so many survivors. Tomorrow will be the last working day of this summit, David. They will focus on transparency.
Dave.
What I like about this clip is especially the ending, which the lines are something like, if anything is to get better, it depend on the people, on you. You are the church. Any changes that are made by caring persons who love their church, are committed to it, and wanted to be the church that Jesus has called them to. So I like that line a lot. And, Marianne is moving along so fast. But I just want to tell you what we want to do in the next 20 minutes is tell you about 3 events that meant a lot to me, and then we'll end up with about 15 minutes of questions. So keep your questions in mind, and let's move along. Well, we stayed in a wonderful hotel, and it was called the Atlanta Star. And in the foreground, you can see, this is the rooftop, which looked out at the Vatican. And we saw that every day, and we ate our breakfast there. And so there were beautiful aspects of these 6 days together that we'll never forget. And that coupled with a very tragic piece of church history in the Catholic Church. And our routine every morning was get up early, go to breakfast and sit and look at that beautiful scenery, and then off we would go to St. Peter's Plaza. And this is the front where you can't go beyond that fence there with cameras. So I often stood there. I either had an appointment for an interview, or there were just persons from different countries waiting to interview. So this is an example of a person, I think, from France. And what's her name, Mary?
Ann Compton.
This
from
is
NBC.
Anne from NBC interviewing me at a march we were having that morning. And these are my friends that are from the United States and went with me, and all of us are from SNAP, and they're holding posters because I think it was the next night or two we had a march through the town, the village, which was wonderful of Rome to allow us to do that. And it was called March to Zero, because what we really want is zero tolerance in the Catholic Church. That translated means that any priest offenders, one credible accusation is asked to leave, is made to leave, is fired, defrocked, let go. And any bishop who knowingly passes on those perpetrators from place to place, zero, they're gone, asked, fired. That's not being done, so that's a shame. And then we come to the first event that I wanted to share with you. This is another of my dear friends, Juan Carlos. And I don't know how much you know, but there was a major situation in Chile, and it involved the bishop who had observed this man and his colleagues being raped in the seminary and did nothing about it. And he and his two friends have worked for years to get him removed, and finally that did happen. But we were just getting ready to go into something called the PreSummit. Before the summit was called the PreSummit. And I was honored to be one of 10 survivors from around the globe, the world. I represented the United States that was selected to go to this PreSummit, and there were 4 cardinals there on behalf of the Pope. And 2 important ones was Archbishop Scicluna, and you saw him in the first clip. He talked, and a Cardinal Supich from Chicago. And the purpose of the summit was for survivors to tell the cardinals what we wanted, how we were feeling, and they would then take our voices back to the summit. And supposedly that was their way to hear from survivors. It really wasn't the best way, but I think they had to think of something. So that's what they did. And the atmosphere was, so there are 10 of us for hierarchy. And the atmosphere was edgy and charged, because some of the survivors were angry and tired and had lost hope. And so the first question, or the first statement one of the survivors says to Bishop Scicluna, this is how it started. He says, the survivor, "I don't trust you, and I don't trust any of you. And by the way, where is Pope Francis?" And then it was like, "Where's Waldo?" So, and that went on for quite a while. If he cares so much, why is he not here? And went in a way from bad to worse. And hopefully it made a difference. I'm really not sure about that. But my words were, I told the bishops that time was really running out. And if we ever wanted a church worthy of our children and our grandchildren's trust and dedication and love and commitment, the church would have to act now and clean up the mess it's created and the lives it has destroyed. The time is now, I said. The Catholic Church needs a clean sweep now, and Pope Francis holds the broom. And then I read our demands, and they were fairly similar from all the survivors. One was the zero tolerance. All survivors from different countries want it over now, and they want priest predators gone, because there still are many within the church around the world. And they want bishops gone and held accountable for passing on knowingly perpetrators to other places. And I just brought this to show because for us in the Catholic Church, it's a very helpful. We have a database, and it's called bishopaccountability.org. And you can go to it, you can put in the priest you're concerned about, and if he has any accusations, one or more, he's in the database. And this has been ongoing for years and years, but by my dear friend Ann Barrett Doyle and Terry. And it's done so much good around the world, but they're now working on other countries and databases. And this is just a sample of all the bishops from different countries that have either passed on actually molested young people or adults and covered up. And so the data says that 90 bishops from around the world are on record as having been accused publicly for allegedly abusing minors or sexual abuse misconduct of adults. So that connected to our first ask. And the second was, we want the Catholic Church, the higher ups, to refer allegations to law enforcement, not to try to take care of them themselves. Like, we know organizations cannot police themselves, like the gymnasts, the colleges. They're too invested in protecting their good name. So we want the higher ups to turn over information to the civil institutions. And then to open the file, that means literally the archdiocese have what we call secret files. No one can get to them, no one can see them. And in those secret files is all the information on priest predators. So we want to demand force. That is why we have independent investigations going on right now, because no one has any authority to get into those files, to know the perpetrators, where they are, who are the ones that are still serving, without civil recourse. So you've heard of the Pennsylvania independent study. They're now investigation. They're now going on in, I think, 9 more states. So this is good news. And the last one was, believe it or not, the Catholic Church has paid lobbyists working against maintaining the statutes of limitations. So we want that to stop. And if you think on that one, that's really disturbing. And bullying those who are working against statute of limitations reform, which we've just had in the state of Washington, and it's good news, because an adult who was raped as a child, I believe, now has up to age 50 to report. And that's a big switch and change. So those were some of our asks. And the last thing I said to the bishops was that quote from scripture came to my mind that says something like this: you have to first settle up, make peace with your brothers and sisters, and then bring your gifts to the altar. And it's from Matthew 5:24. Because I believe that's really what the church needs to do, especially our ministers and all of us. We have to settle up, make peace with each other, then go to the altar and bring our gifts. And that was an event, one of the 3 events that meant a lot to me, the PreSummit, or the Summit for Survivors. And the next was the day, almost every day we had a press conference on a theme. One was adults as survivors of abuse. One was sharing stories of abuse. My day happened to be on nun abuse, nuns as abusers. And this is something that had not been talked about at all and still hasn't seen the light of day. Adults who were abused as children by nuns. And I think partly it's still in the darkness, so to speak, because it's so shocking. No one wants to think of a woman not as a caregiver, a caretaker. And so the thought just, we'd rather just leave that one alone, so to speak. But recently, since I'm the contact for those abused by nuns for SNAP, and since the Pennsylvania independent investigation, I've had about 60 survivors of nun abuse call me and tell me their stories. And that's the tippy tip of the iceberg. because you know of the orphanages in the past in Native American communities and underprivileged communities and all the nuns around the world. So there are millions also, and it's in a way becoming the focus is shifting a little bit to survivors of nun abuse. And then of course we have the nuns abused by the priests, which is another topic. And then we have priests who have fathered children. So we can go on and on. But that was my day, and I was very happy to have a day that I could talk about nun abuse. And part of what we did that day, we had a discussion and questions and answers. Then we left the session and we walked over to, I always get these letters mixed up, the UIS, no, is that right?
International Union.
The International Union of Superiors General Building. There it is, UISG. And the walk in itself was very moving. It was walking through the streets and people stopping and looking, and we had our banner which we held.
Let me go back. You can show, there's a little
Which
piece of the banner.
is much longer, and those are actual faces of children who were abused by nuns. And one of the survivors made it, and one of the team brought it, and we carried it through the town. And we wanted to deliver a letter to the superiors general. There are about 10 there who represent all the orders from around the world. So we weren't sure we would be let in, because for years we have tried in the United States to knock on the door of the Leaders' Conference of Religious Women in the United States, and were refused for probably like 14 years. They didn't want to hear from us, and we simply wanted to share what we learned, be on their, a speaker at their conferences. But doing this that day, most of us were like, well, they're either going to open the door or not. And the good news is they buzzed us in. And this was a delightful sister who was like the receptionist. I don't really know her name. I'm not sure she spoke a lot of English because she was so engaging and open. And below my picture, it says #nuns2. And it is a hashtag I invented without really knowing the extent of what was going to happen with it. I just said, well, everybody else makes hashtags, I'll make one. Nuns do it. And I was really hoping for survivors who were abused by nuns to weigh in there. But what has happened is mostly all the entries are from people who are really appalled and upset. It goes on and on and on. And every once in a while there's a survivor or even some nuns who were abused by nuns. But she was so great, and she said, the team isn't here, they're at the summit, which was good news. But you can go up to the 3rd floor. So went up to the 3rd floor with my letter in hand and met another delightful, I'm not sure if she were a sister or not, I don't think so. But she welcomed me and she gave me a great big hug, and she whispered in my ear, I understand, thank you. And we were all gathered in that space, many survivors, cameras, and it was a very wonderful moment.
This is after.
Oh, and these again are members of our team, but we were very pleased at the outcome of that day. And that's pictures taken as we finished, and we're about to go back to our hotel, I think, or another interview, I don't really remember. And then that brings us to the third meaningful event, which was really the outcome day, or the day when everything came together, and it was a Sunday.
It was
So
after the summit,
the summit was Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
and half a Sunday,
Pardon me?
half a Sunday.
And half of Sunday. So this is the Vatican and St. Peter's Plaza, and you can see all the people down below. And Marianne loves to point to the window,
Right here.
right there, where Pope Francis comes out and says his words and blesses everyone. And you can see the many saints and apostles around the perimeter of it. And this was my last interview, which took place that day. In that moment, we were on the top of the building where that summit for survivors was. We were in that same building, which is right across from the Vatican. It was called Villa Bambino. Via Bambino. But I was asked by CBS, along with two friends who were from Pennsylvania, both working hard on the statutes of limitations, on abolishing them. So the three of us were interviewed. And before our interview started, we were actually listening to the Pope.
Right over there, there's a little white spot, right there. That's and this person over here was translating into English.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, and I don't know what to say about it, how I felt. I really don't know. There were thousands of people down below, and the Pope was speaking in Italian, and the person over here was translating for us.
and it was cold.
Pardon
And
me?
the wind was blowing.
And the wind was whipping. And then we had our interview, which is another clip that we have all of them, but this the CBS one, and I had been followed by CBS because I did a interview way back on Nun Abuse, so they told me they would like to follow me, so that was great. And I don't remember a lot about it. I do remember that we each were asked at the end, how did we feel about the summit and the outcome? And of course I said disappointed. I don't remember what the other two said. And then they asked for one word. And I said, of what we wanted or something, and I said action. And I don't remember what the other two said. And I'm going to conclude now so we have some time.
You wanna show the team giving
Oh,
its
yeah,
grades?
so it gave me great joy to give a report card to and if you're Catholic, we're in Catholic schools, report card day was something. You had to wait for the pastor. If he couldn't come, you didn't get your report card until he came. And he would sit down and you'd go up to the desk and he would, and you know, for some it was embarrassing. You could tell the conversation. So it was my turn to give a report card. And basically, all those demands I mentioned earlier, they were not met. What ended up, or the outcome, the Pope probably met his goals. He wanted to raise awareness on the part of bishops around the world that this problem of clergy abuse is a significant problem in the Catholic Church. Because some bishops, or bishops of other countries, continue to believe it was only a United States problem. And also with their civil system, in some cases they didn't even have to report crimes of sexual abuse. So he probably did do that. And the other thing, well, that's about it actually. But what they ended up with were 8 preventative measures for the future. And they're just simple things like having a handbook, doing a better job at preparing seminarians, things like that. Well, you don't need a summit to arrive at that. We wanted action, and we did not get action. And children were not safer because of those plans. And so did he listen to survivors? I don't think so. And will he ever take action? I'm not sure. And I'd like to end with these words. The church would need to tell the truth from how it got from there to here in order to have a better future. Pope Francis would need to tell the story. It is the unresolved issues in our lives that remain the elephant in the room, taking up a bunch of space where good could flourish. Without reconciling the past with the present, there could be no justice or healing in our lives or within our churches, nor a brighter here and now. So, time for some questions. Yes.
Mary, Ethan Crawford. I wanted to ask, just knowing you've addressed the things in your church, but ecumenically, is there anything that is jointly being done for all of the people?
Well, I think, I'd like to think, and that's why I'm at a loss and I don't have statistics or anything, but many churches are working on child protection policies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really good outline of ideas that I brought along. And I know that to be true, and we had something called the Dallas Charter several years ago, and that was a decision. And beyond that, I hear of many cases of abuses in different churches, but I don't know what they're doing about it, and I've not heard of churches coming together around it either.
Is there something that we could look at as let's say an outreach within our own church? Just by your testimony today, I think the best thing to form an action plan that others can be involved. And I think I compliment you on your courage here to go forward, to share this with us, and make that as a statement for all of us to be aware of what we can do and speak out.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's that clean sweep thing, you know, we all hold the broom. And within your own community, it would be wise that you know what's the situation. Do you have a problem? And of course you must. It's just to varying degrees. But the more you know, the more better you are able to take good, right action, yes?
I'd like to respond to Ethan. Several years ago, I can't give you the date, but many years ago, the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church USA, sensitive to this issue, initiated a program with the help of a woman from Mercer Island at that time to do training of clergy around issues related to boundaries. Because what was happening was that people in positions of power, clergy, teachers, lawyers, doctors, you keep on, there's no profession that is immune. But people in positions of power were not respecting boundaries. And that program, which began, and I just happened to be on the General Assembly Council the first time the woman from Mercer Island came and did the training, that program became, as I understood it, mandatory across the Presbyterian Church, that presbyteries, Seattle Presbytery and others, were expected to run these programs for the clergy members of those presbyteries. And you were expected and required to go to those programs, not just once, but at least every 2 to 3 years, And so it was an attempt to heighten the awareness, but also to begin to set some understandings as to what constitutes the abuse and the violation of boundaries. Because it has happened, I'm afraid to say it's probably still happening. But at least that program has existed, and it would bear investigation to see how it's doing today. I really don't know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Another question? Yes?
My name's Mary. I'm just wondering, do victims, do they report to law enforcement today? Like,
Well, now
Now
we
it's-
encourage,
Yeah.
like when I speak to anyone, I usually ask, have you considered that? Because we're not supposed to be like advisors, but
right, sure.
engage in conversation. But yes, we suggest that they do that, number one.
Yeah.
And then, of course, have care for themselves, a therapist, a friend, to continue to talk through, and then an attorney, if they care to bring an attorney in. In fact, the sooner the better for someone who thinks they might like to move forward to get an attorney. Because a good attorney, and we have one here in Seattle, an excellent one, will walk a survivor through the options they have. Because they have 2 or 3. They don't have to file a suit. They could go face to face with their attorney. They could do a number of things, or nothing. But those are helpful steps for survivors.
Does the new law change that a little bit? When does that go into
See,
effect?
the sad thing about any statute of limitations reform is that it's not retroactive.
Okay.
To me, that's very sad, because there are millions who have not seen the light of day or justice. But there is something called a window of opportunity that you can work for, and it has been initiated in about, I think, 14 states or so, which gives survivors, all survivors of childhood sex abuse, 1 window, 1 year window, or sometimes 2, to come forward, file a claim, or seek justice, which was what allowed me to go forward. The abuse was in Los Angeles, and back in about 2003, they had a window of opportunity. So I'm an advocate for that, because most of the survivors are of long ago, 70, 60, and they deserve to have a moment.
Would you tell everybody what the average age is at which, because people say, well, that happened to you, why is it only way later that you decide
Well,
to do
data
something?
now and studies say the average age of awareness, that's not quite the right word, is 52 years old. When a survivor of early childhood sex abuse comes to terms with it, or it's allowed to surface.
And that was true for you.
And that was exactly true for me, because I was 52. So there are changes. When you ask what can we do, we can advocate for statute of limitations reform, which we just did have in the state of Washington. But I'm pushing for the window. And yes, and there was another question. Yes.
Mary, I'm Tom Waldenhausen, and I was curious. One of the things you mentioned when you were talking about the PreSummit was the emphasis that you folks had on trying to get these sealed records open. Can you comment just a little bit more on that? And
Well, yes, it's
may go?
because so many cases that are going forward in one way or another get stuck.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the facts and they don't have the data to back up their claim, so to speak, because they're locked in these what we call secret files. So for survivors and others, we don't believe the church can ever really heal and move forward until there's that, we always say, transparency, where they give over, release, and come clean, so to speak. So they're very important to a lot of cases and survivors' justice. Mm-hmm.
Can I say something?
Sure.
It seems to me that in your case, one of the things that hinged on was that the priest that you were involved with had been transferred from pillar to post to pillar to post, and I think there were 39 women, and that would be the tip of the iceberg. This was a very busy man, but you know, having the church records to look at, why did he get transferred? And often it was, well, he was ill, and so he had time out, and then he was sent to another place or
And
something
to
like that.
add on, it would show complicity,
Yes.
the part of the church, the particular bishop that you're trying to get the records from, probably I hate to say it this way, but it's a big mess. Because bishops can't expose because they're part of the problem. Well, they could, but who wants to? Because every one of them have covered up. It just has to be the case. And I think that's what holds the Pope back a little bit too, from just saying, okay, we're going to ask all the bishops who have covered up to leave. Well, in essence, that could mean himself, because in Argentina, he did cover up. So I think the best thing he can do is tell the truth of how they got here and how sorry he is about it and how he really isn't sure what to do, but ask for our trust that he really will begin and give us a 1, 2, 3. I mean, it's better than just kind of deflecting and trying to move on. It won't do any good. Well, I thank you so much. You've been a wonderful